All right, so today I want to talk about client server interaction over the internet and what that looks like. So let's assume the internet is perfect. Let's assume the top is the client or the top is the server. And so when I send out every time from the client to the server, since the internet is perfect, the packet lands there at the exact same time every single time with no error, right? So with this, we kind of gain the property that every server tick can use exactly whatever the client sent right on when it sent it. So there's no like problems here. We always have data flowing in at a steady rate. But this is not always the case. So packets can have like variable time to get to the server because they can be sitting in like queues, right? So if that's the perfect time, then any other time after it is also like a viable time it could have landed there, right? So we could have had packets arriving at any of like those times. So let's just say. Um, okay. And so that wouldn't really matter in most cases, but in some cases it matters more. So kind of new to this, but okay. So here's a situation where it wouldn't matter as much. So if your packet always lands right there on perfect internet, then error doesn't really matter too much, or at least it matters much less than the next situation we'll look at, because no matter like we have a big margin of error where if a packet comes in at any later time, we're still gonna get it within that tick. Okay, so that might not be the case though. So let's say instead our packets are landing around here with perfect internet. So now this is a much worse situation, right? Because now any delay, like let's say we have a delay. So let's say instead this packet ended up going here. So now what do we have? We have an empty tick, which is this is an empty tick, and then we get a double tick right here. So we can go from an empty to a double quite easily if this is the setup. And this setup is defined by kind of the offset defined by when the client and the server start up and start sending messages. So that kind of sucks, right? So if we had perfect internet, one thing we might want to do is report back to the client how far into the tick our updates are landing, and pull and then like either delay or do something to adjust the current thing, right? So instead, I don't really know. It's like, okay, I see how that works now. So, we're landing late into the tick, so we tell the client, you need to move back a bit. Or you need to, yeah, so some adjustment so that then it's landing closer to the start of the tick, right? The optimal is like right there. This is assuming perfect internet. Because the other thing is we don't have perfect internet. And so how do we know if like what the perfect like theoretical time would be to get there? That is something that has to be computed over time. So you won't know it immediately. So you can't even make this adjustment until you've done some computation. So if you make this adjustment too early, so let's say like you think the perfect timing would be like here and you've done a shift to try and account for that, but then there was actually a better timing that you hadn't considered yet because you haven't collected enough data, and the next tick lands here because so maybe I'll draw that better. So the the next tick you thought would land here, but it doesn't because there was an even better timing for a packet, which is like a little bit faster. And so your knowledge of what the perfect send time is wrong because you haven't collected enough data points yet. And also the the perfect send rate or the like that is a variable thing that changes over time depending on like congestion on the internet and stuff. So you have to be able to dynamically update that. So probably the best place to send it would be somewhere in the middle, I guess, because then if your system like adjusts, then you have a margin of error in front and in back of it that's maximal. So you can kind of have error up to like that and you'll still be landing within the same tick. So yeah, I would say a system that can self-adjust to try and make the packet land in the middle of the two is probably a good one. So that's problem one. That's assuming, well, non-perfect internet. And now there's another issue. So now assume perfect internet again so I can demonstrate this. So these ticks are evenly spaced. And the computer will believe that they are evenly spaced, but relative to each other, one is going faster than the other. And that is kind of horrifying. So what happens in that situation? So we have perfect internet. So the first one goes here. The second one will go here. And notice it's a little bit earlier than the last one came in. That's because the time scale of the client is a little bit faster. So it's going to think it's doing the right thing and the internet's perfect. But over time, this packet just keeps landing earlier and earlier until one of the time it's like right in front of it, and then on the next iteration it's right behind it. And what gets produced here is now kind of a bad thing because you kind of have this issue that's unfixable in a sense because you have two updates here and you have another one here, and so there's like an extra one on the server that's not like going to be accounted for, or you'll have to find a way to reconcile this. And like usually what you would do is just like, okay, forget about that one, right? Because there's no way to like shift everything along and have all of the data be processed correctly. So we just might forget about that one and just keep going. But so this situation, like however many ticks it takes to happen, it's periodic because one is going faster than the other. So in order to correct for this, you would have to first assume you know what the you've measured out the like perfect internet speed if there was no error or no like variance in the travel time. And then you would have to empirically like compute what this speed difference is. And then on the whatever, let's say this guy's going too fast, you'd have to like bump it up a bit. So you'd bump up your like ticks, your tick spacing, and that would allow it to like be correct. So that's situation one. And I just want to compare this to the other situation, which is like the variance issue where, you know, you have this and then by variance on the next tick, you get one behind, I guess. And then you get one in front again. So that was one situation. And then I'll just like do another situation here, which is like, I think you're landing right after it, and you land right before it, and then after you go right after it again. So these situations of like variance error and like these are a lot easier to fix because the number of like things on each side is the same, and so you can kind of like say, oh, this one should have happened here. And so on the server, you can kind of like, if you have a way of rolling back, you can roll back to here and then apply this guy like in the right tick and then continue on with the next one. Same thing with this. You'd be able to look at your history and then like move it forward a bit, and you could like redo the state almost on the server. So there'd be like ways of like fixing that, but the situation I described where it's like a time scale issue, you actually end up with like more ticks on one side than the other. So you have to like it's almost like a guaranteed loss of information or too much information that can't be handled. Okay. So that's a lot. But those are the things that can happen. So variance related problems are semi-fixable, but clock delta issues are way harder to fix. So that's the thing. Now what else? Yeah, I want to talk about. Well, let me see how long this has been going for. All right, I'll stop this one here.